Welcome to my new studio. Actually, that's not true. This is a temporary setup while I get my office built out. But it is actually kind of true. It's my new studio for now. What you can't see is the messy Lego table that is behind this delightful black curtain, or the rest of the basement that is still filled with boxes, because unpacking seems to take a really long time. Sometimes longer than actually packing up itself. Today, I want to talk about something that I am in the process of sort of uncovering and learning, and that is, how do I decide what problem to fix when I've got too many problems? For anybody who's new to the channel, my name is Seth. I'm a full-time fantasy author. I've written like 22 books. 16 of them have been published so far, and I'm looking forward to this writing journey with you. I make these videos because there are a lot of bad books out there, and I don't want yours to be one of them. Now, we've talked about this a little bit before, but I wanted to talk about it specifically in regard to writing. See, I just put a manuscript out there into the world, and it came back with a big fat nope written all over it. My beta readers were really kind in saying, hey Seth, this only kind of sucks, but I knew the truth. And it's a truth that I didn't want to hear, because when I read back over what I had written, I honestly didn't know how to fix it. So what I want to do is I want to run you through the process that I used in order to figure out how to fix it. And that is that I went to somebody who knows more about writing than I do. In this case, I found an editor, and I sent it to that editor and said, hey, can you please read this over? Can you tell me what it is about this story that's just not working? I had some ideas, but I didn't know concretely. And if you want to fix something, you have to have that concrete understanding of what's actually wrong. Because I'm not about to spend months fixing something that isn't even a problem, or fixing a whole bunch of things and then finding out that I never actually addressed the main problem. And it was incredibly helpful. It was very illuminating to get the memo back saying, hey, this is what's good about this book. This is what's not so good. And what was fascinating to me is that I actually already knew most of what the editor said. Most of the problems that the book had were things that I had identified in my own head and just either didn't want to admit, or I didn't understand why they were a problem. Despite having written 22 books and published 16 of them, there's still parts of writing as a craft that I don't really understand, that I am lacking in. And everybody's got different skill sets, and everybody's got different levels of skill when it comes to writing. At the end of the day, it's helpful to think about writing not as a singular skill, but really as a big bucket where you have all of these other smaller, like micro skills. And so you might say dialogue is one of those micro skills, or plotting or pacing might be a micro skill, or openings or closings. You might say that the way that somebody weaves various storylines together, that could be a micro skill. And you can be good at some of these things and not good at others. But most of us as writers tend to default to the ones that we're comfortable with. We tend to default to the things that we feel best at. The downside to this, however, is that we'll often write without ever improving. Because if you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're not going to get better. And so it's important to start introducing some of these areas where we're weak into our writing, so that we can get better, so that we can become more well-rounded, and so that we can start shoring up the weaknesses of our stories. And that's really what I set out to do, because I realized that this is a story that I want to tell, but I can't tell. I'm just not good enough yet. Again, understanding why I'm not good enough is so incredibly important that I had to call in some experts, other people who are very good at dissecting a story and figuring out what needs to happen to improve it. Now, I paid for an editor, and not everybody has that ability. In fact, for a really long time, for years, I didn't have that ability. I didn't have the disposable income to do it. But that's okay if you don't. there are other ways to get that feedback. I've been vocal in the past about how I don't really like critique groups, but this is the one instance when I would say finding and joining a critique group might be your best move. Now, the reason I don't like critique groups is because everybody tends to be at about the same level of writing. And it's sort of this idea of if you are as good as everybody else in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. You're not going to learn a whole lot from those people. But in this case, you're not necessarily trying to learn from them. Instead, you're trying to use their difference of perspective and their critical eye to identify in your manuscript what the major problem is. But there's another challenge that we have to overcome, which is that most critique groups are going to read your stuff and say things like, "Oh, it's so nice," or "Oh, this is something I really love about it." What I need you to do, though, is I need you to be very specific. You ask the one question. I don't know if you've seen my video on the one question. If not, definitely go check it out. It will change your life. But we're going to ask that question. What is one thing that I can do better? What is one thing that I can improve? We're going to shift it slightly, though, and we're going to ask the question, what is the most important thing that I improve? Is there something in this manuscript that if I improved it would have the largest impact? And it might take a little while to get that answer. It might take some prodding and some poking and some explaining what you're trying to achieve. But even if you don't have the money to pay for a developmental editor, you can use this method to figure out where the weak spots are in your manuscript. Then what do you do after that? So in my manuscript, my weak spots were my characters, specifically that their motivation wasn't clear enough. And so to fix that, I went on over to Barnes & Noble and I perused through the bookshelves and I found a book on writing characters. And I bought it and now I'm studying it. And as I'm reading it, I am keeping my characters in my mind, and I'm actually writing out the ways, based on what this book is saying, that I can improve. And you can do this for anything. There are books on plotting, there are books on tension, there are books on every aspect of writing craft. And so you just need to hone in and focus on the specific problem that you're trying to solve. Don't try to solve too many things at once, because the reality is that all of our manuscripts have a lot of problems. They're not as good as they could possibly be. But if we try to focus on everything at once, typically we're just going to make a mess of it. And so instead, we want to hone in our focus and really, really bear down on that specific thing. So again, for me, with my manuscript that I just got back that is not very good, improving the characters will give me the biggest bang for buck. Now, some of you might be saying, "Seth, I don't have the money to go to Barnes & Noble and buy a book. I don't have any money at all. Give me a solution that doesn't cost me anything." Sure, no problem. Find a library. Everybody can find a library. If you can't find a library, get your phone out and Google it. There are tips on craft literally everywhere. And practically everything you need to know is online already. You just have to be willing to invest the time to search for it. Now, if you have a little bit of money, I would strongly recommend that you invest in some good books on your specific genre to begin to understand some of the convention. And if you're fairly comfortable with your genre, like I'm fairly comfortable with my genre, then you start to narrow your focus to pick specific craft elements that you want to try to fix. But it all starts with understanding what it is that you're trying to do. So that's where I would recommend, if you're not feeling confident about your book, find somebody to look at it. Preferably somebody who's better at writing than you are, or just has an editor's eye. Because the reality is that I can't do what an editor can do. I can read your book, and I can tell you, I'm not feeling this one. This isn't really it. There's something wrong. But I can't necessarily tell you exactly what is wrong. An editor is going to be trained to do that. And again, if you can't afford an editor, don't worry about it. Find a good community, offer that service yourself to other people, offer to read their manuscripts and help them fix them, and then ask that people return the favor by reading yours. There are a lot of communities that you can join both in person and online where you can get this kind of feedback. So don't be shy. I know it's sort of nerve-wracking to take your content the stories that you work really hard on, that you pour your heart and soul into, and give them to other people for feedback. But if I can share a secret, it's that the fastest way to find success as an author is to develop a thick skin, is to distance yourself from your craft, and to just say, I am going to get better no matter what. If you can do that, and you can start getting that feedback and not letting it be a personal attack on you, but instead be an illuminating light on your work, you're gonna find yourself improving like crazy.